get married soon. You starting to look old.
My dad's been saying that to me since I was 15. Because nice Greek girls are supposed to do 3 things in life. Marry Greek boys, make Greek babies, and feed everyone until the day we die. Our house, however, was modeled after the Parthenon, complete with Corinthian columns and guarded by statues of the gods. In case the neighbors had any doubts about our heritage, they could just check out our subtle tribute to the Greek flag. Every morning, my dad would lecture us on the history of our people, the great civilization, the Greeks.
Okay, now, name 3 things the Greeks did first.
Astronomy, philosophy, and democracy.
Now, give me a word. Any word. You should be proud to be Greek.
Oh right, I forgot what am I meant to focus on. Okay, so I'm sure many of you, like me, watched classical movies like Hercules when we were kids, and we all at one point thought that Hercules and Megan lived happily in the end, and Zeus was a moral, loyal god to his wife, and Hades was a greedy and selfish god in Greek mythology. And we had a similar perspective when it came to the failed adaptation of Percy Jackson, and in many Hollywood films we have seen the demonization of Hades and the glorification of Zeus. Well, if you look at the ancient Greek mythology, it's completely the opposite how Hollywood in the past portrayed these ancient religious figures. If there's any Hollywood film that has some ways accurate depiction of Greek gods, it's actually Thor: Love and Thunder. How Zeus is portrayed as a narcissist who cares about his pleasure, but inaccurate how he is portrayed as coward and not a powerful ruler who takes his leadership in Olympus very seriously. Although I haven't watched the Disney Plus Percy Jackson series, the TV show has been trying to correct the mistakes of the 2010s adaptation. And since people have access to the internet, experts of Greek mythology have been criticizing Hollywood and American Christians how they have been villainizing Hades. And this led to Greek mythology fans viewing Hades as a misunderstood villain when they researched the original source material. Even though people started to look at the accuracies of Hades' persona, Hades' relationship with Persephone was met with some critics, including those who identify themselves as feminist media critics, criticizing their so-called complicated relationship, which I will get on to that later. So how did Hades become villainized by the public and media? Well, before Hollywood, Western Christians, including early adapters of Christianity, have been demonizing the god of the underworld due to their belief that the underworld is associated with the devil in Christianity. They compared Hades to Satan or Lucifer, portraying him as evil. Now, the early adapters of Christianity, like Italians or Greeks under the Byzantine era, Coptic Egyptians, Ethiopians, Armenians, Georgians, Syriac-speaking Christians in Levant and Mesopotamia, aka Levant, did not view Hades as the concept of hell, but they viewed him through 3 lenses. A place where there are shadows holding the realm of the dead, a person or monster where cosmic tyrants or gluttonous beast who swallowed human souls upon death, a vanquished kingdom where the realm shattered by Jesus Christ during the anastasis. Whatever. The early adapters of Christianity had their own unique perspective about Hades, which the early church redefined the Greek word Hades using their own local linguistic terms. The hostility towards Hades became amplified when it came to Western Christians taking some teachings from early Christians and viewing Hades as concept of Satan or hell. And since centuries of demonization of Hades by Christian society, this later led to demonization of him in modern media, especially American entertainment. His villainization in media started when Walt Disney made an experimental film in 1934 called The Goddess of Spring, way before the 1997 adaptation of Hercules. Hades in this scene is portrayed as a devil in the underworld, while Persephone is being victimized. And obviously, as we all know, this later leads to his villainization in Disney's Hercules, Percy Jackson 2010's Clash of the Titans, Wrath of the Titans, and Descendants 3. Okay, I'm not gonna blame Descendants because Disney's Descendants in some ways is a sequel or aftermath of the original animated films. So I'm just gonna leave it there. Okay, Disney Descendants 3 is completely irrelevant. After all the dehumanization we have been seeing of Hades, what led to him being portrayed as a misunderstood, or most importantly, romanticized, especially among young women who like to view him through the lens of the female gaze? Well, before Hades was romanticized, he was first portrayed as misunderstood by the media, which I have said before, access to the internet, where fans who are knowledgeable about the Greek myths criticized his portrayal in mainstream media. Greek mythology fans have been comparing Hades to other gods who weren't loyal to their wives and sometimes tend to be narcissistic or extremely controversial. From the original source of the Greek myths, the story of Hades begins with him being the eldest son of Titans Kronos and Rhea. Now, Kronos is a mentally ill father, pretty much practicing cannibalism by swallowing his children like Hades and his siblings like Poseidon, Hera, Demeter, and Hestia as soon as they were born. And the reason why he did that is because he did not like his children to overthrow his hierarchy. But why are you even having children in the first place if you don't want your kids to take over your place? I don't know, makes no sense. Now, the younger brother Zeus grew up and tricked Kronos into regurgitating his brothers. The brothers launched a decade-long war against Kronos. After defeating the Titans with help from the Cyclopes, who forged Hades from famous Helm of Darkness, granting him invincibility, the three brothers drew lots to divide the cosmos. Zeus won the sky and the kings of the throne. Poseidon won the seas. Hades received the underworld and the hidden riches beneath the earth, which is gold, gems, and minerals. As you all know, his most famous story revolves around Persephone, the goddess of spring, and the daughter of Demeter, who is the goddess of agriculture and harvest. Since Hades fell in love with Persephone, he abducted her to his underworld kingdom after he requested consent from Zeus to have his daughter as Hades' wife. Obviously, the mother Demeter was devastated, which she rejected following her duties. This led to Earth fell into a devastating frozen famine. Realizing humanity would starve, Zeus commanded Hades to return Persephone. Before letting her return, Hades offered Persephone a few pomegranate seeds. Persephone became tied to the realm of the underworld after she ate the pomegranate seeds. Because she ate 4 seeds, in summer and spring, Persephone stayed with her mother on Earth, causing plants to bloom and crops to grow. And in autumn and winter, Persephone returns to rule beside Hades in the underworld, causing Demeter's grief to freeze the land. Now, I actually kind of like this tale because these seasons tends to symbolize the types of emotion and characteristics they represent, which is relatable to humans, by the way. Since Hades is the ruler of the realm and the dead, unlike his brother who constantly get involved in war, human affairs, and training hundreds of warriors, aka demigods, who are half mortal and half god, Hades most of the time does not leave the underworld. His animal Cerberus, who is a 3-headed hound, guard the gates to prevent the dead from leaving and living from the entering. Now, you might be wondering how come Hades later became misunderstood by fans despite his abduction of the woman he loved. If we look at the ancient Greek myths through modern lens, Hades was arguably the most principled, faithful, and reliable of the male Olympians. Hades never really had superiority complex, having selfish ambitions of overthrowing other gods to take over Olympus for hierarchical power. And he was one of the very rare gods being loyal to his wife and respecting his woman despite abduction. Zeus and other gods on multiple occasions have been manipulating women and getting involved in SA towards vulnerable goddesses, including female mortals. Unfortunately, Zeus's wife Hera does a lot of victim blaming towards Zeus's female victims by putting a curse on them. Ancient Greek people did not view Hades as evil or cruel. Instead, they viewed him as a god with a principle who treats people fairly by their deeds. However, they did fear him by not calling out his name, since it could lead to their death, and didn't often worship him as much as Zeus, Poseidon, and other gods. Hades in some ways represents the Sigma male archetype, where he doesn't surround himself with dominating leaders, but minds his own business, being isolated. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Percy Jackson series, not the adaptation, but the books, was one of the first media that humanized Hades. You can tell the author was criticizing pop culture media back then, how they portrayed Hades, but by making Hades a misunderstood character in his books. The way how he is portrayed is powerful and deeply bitterful, a ruler who doesn't desire to overthrow Olympus. His character is being used as a red herring. The books didn't focus on romance between Hades and Persephone, but they were mentioned here and there. The couple was considered a normal marriage. Percy Jackson novels sometimes showed Hades' vulnerable side when he is protective over his children and wife. While he is bitter and dangerous, his actions are driven by grief and fierce desire to keep his loved ones safe. Now, what led to romanticizing Hades? Now, I've been paying attention to the internet for, I guess, more than a few years, and I can definitely say that this romanticization of his character first started off with fan fiction, which most of the genre was dark romance, and later this led to young adult literature focusing on modernization of their relationship and timeline of the story. The themes are often dark romance and fantasy, while some tend to be erotic. These books are very much written by women, since romance and dark fantasy genre are obviously targeted and written by women, which in modern pop culture, Hades appeals to the female gaze, where his characteristics does represent traditional masculinity, where he is dominating while also expresses vulnerability and loyalty towards his love interest, which very much attracts female audiences. Hades tends to treat Persephone as his equal, ruling the underworld beside him, which most of these novel books are considered to be feminist retelling by female authors and readers. Most of these novels aren't very accurate how Persephone met Hades. Instead of being abducted, she goes to the underworld by herself because of her overprotected mother or corruption she has to deal with by her father Zeus. Books like Touch of Darkness is about forced contract when Persephone loses a bet to Hades, growing into an intense romance where Hades encourages Persephone to embrace her own dark power. Hades is portrayed as a mysterious god. The genre is new adult urban fantasy, romance, and gods in modern society, which is kind of similar to Lore Olympus. Neon God is a fake dating or arrangement-based relationship. Persephone flees across the... I don't know how to pronounce this, so I'm gonna try my best. Persephone flees across the Styx, which is the underworld city, to escape forced contract to Zeus, and Hades agrees to help her ruin Zeus's reputation in exchange for revenge. Hades is portrayed as a mythical figure who prefers to stay in lower city, staying entirely out of corrupt politics of Olympus. I actually like how this book in modern sense portrays the political corruption in Olympus, considering the fact how Greek gods get involved in wars so often to take over Olympus. The genre is obviously dark romance and erotic retelling. Hades and Persephone, Curse of the Gold Arrow, is driven by fate curse trope. Instead of Persephone being kidnapped, she enters the underworld believing him to be a monster, but gradually realizes that he is her protector against a greater hidden threat. Hades is portrayed as a dark lord who rules his shadowy kingdom, burdened by ancient curses and dark truths. The genre is heavily fantasy romance and mythological fiction. And lastly, A Goddess of Spring and Shadows is an escape-turned-bargain where an irresistible fate woven draws Persephone to Hades, forcing her to choose between returning to her old life or accepting a dangerous love that could spark divine war. Hades is portrayed as a dangerous god possessing a deadly, withered touch whose dark realm becomes a sanctuary. The genre is adult romance and fated mates fantasy. Okay, nearly getting there. Lore Olympus is a comic book media that focuses on slow burn, gentle romance that deals heavily with emotional healing, consent, and navigating trauma together within a modern divine society. Hades in the story is a CEO of the Underworld Corp who is deeply insecure, overworked, and loves his pet dog, aka Cerberus. This media is obviously considered a webcomic where the theme is a mythological romance. This webcomic got a lot of attention in the media to the point a famous Hollywood actress like Sydney Sweeney was paid to do the ad for Webtoon.
What's happening? Is this what having a crush feels like? I don't have a crush on him. He was the first person to respect me. Not just because I'm the goddess of spring.
Literally, nobody thought a well-paid actress would do this ad for an extremely underrated media. We didn't only explore the humanization of Hades through literature or reading, but also through visual media on screen. There's a YouTube channel called God School, the Olympian Gods, where the channel is indie animated web series. The style of the animation is 2D. The animation channels the nostalgic aesthetic of 2000 to 2010s animated shows like Winx Club, Monster High, or classic Disney aimed at teens or young adults, maybe, kind of. The themes have high school fantasy genre in ancient Greece, located in magical academy where they learn to handle their powers. Hades is given this gothic emo archetype where he is depicted as quiet, keeping things to himself, and obviously prefers hanging out in the underworld and ignores the noisy drama at Mount Olympus. The relationship between the two characters tend to be gentle, teenage yearning, and emotional connection. They find comfort in each other's quiet space. This show also has a love triangle where Hades is stuck between Persephone and Minty. Minty in modern media has been portrayed as antagonist alongside Demeter. Now we have already talked about most of Persephone's story through Hades' perspective, but there's the other side of her story that isn't mentioned yet. Persephone's real name was Kori, which means maiden. Later, her name changed to Persephone, which means dread queen of the underworld, after she ruled the underground realm alongside Hades. Persephone in the media for decades has been given this one-dimensional characteristic trait where she's innocent, soft, victimized, and represents vibrant flowers. However, today's media explored the other side of her persona when she rules the underworld, where she's given autonomy, sometimes tends to be cold or fearsome, where she causes great dread like her husband. Ancient Greeks also feared calling her name. Another character in Persephone's and Hades' life is Minty, which I've already mentioned, who's water nymph serving as maiden. In some Greek myth sources, Minty was either the first lover or consort for Hades, but she was not the wife or the queen before Hades abducted Persephone. After Hades married his main love interest, Minty grew jealous of Persephone by trying to make herself look more beautiful and tried to make Hades fall in love with her, which this led to Persephone's anger turning Minty into mint. Okay, Persephone is kind of giving Hera vibes here, okay? Persephone's personality trait tends to be very two-dimensional in ancient Greek myths and in modern media, where one side of her character is blooming, soft goddess during summer and spring in Mount Olympus living with her mother, while she's demanding and cold during autumn and winter in the underworld living with her husband. Now, this is where media critics start having discourse about Hades and Persephone's relationship and Hades' portrayal as heroic. If you have been watching my content, I have been criticizing feminist media critics of criticisms they had of some classical female characters, which led to Hollywood writing terrible female characters in this generation. However, there are some valid points they're making when it comes to the glorification of Hades in modern media, despite some disagreements I have with these female critics, since I believe they're lacking some context of the ancient Greek society. The argument that critics have made is Minty, especially Demeter, is wrongfully villainized as overprotective, controlling mother, which these stories erase the traumatizing abduction Persephone went through. And as I've mentioned previously, some of these modern tales erase the abduction and turn it into a female character going to the underworld willingly because she doesn't like feeling trapped in her mother's household, and stamp the story as feminist retelling. First, we have unnecessarily gone from villainization of Hades to villainization of Demeter at the expense of glorifying Hades. The ancient Greeks did not view Demeter as evil or overprotective mother. Instead, they viewed her concerns over her daughter's abduction was justified and understandable, which caused famine to humanity. There are many other criticisms, but this is the main criticisms I wanted to point out. At the same time, I think these critics are lacking some context as to why Hades abducted Persephone. Objectively speaking, Hades did not abduct Persephone because he desired to. He abducted Persephone because the only god he can consent to his marriage with Persephone was her father Zeus, knowing Demeter would not accept her daughter living in the underworld. Also, Zeus is the king of gods. He has more authority over other gods. If Hades did not consent to Zeus but secretly goes on relationship with Persephone, there is a potential possibility that Zeus could cause problems and wage war as he always does. Hades is aware that Zeus is a corrupted leader and he has been on multiple affairs, cheating on his wife, creating demigods, wars, and so many other problems. Which, in my theory, that is probably the reason why Hades took Persephone into the underworld, since he doesn't want his love interest to deal with too much chaos in Olympus compared to what other gods have been dealing with. There's also this debate whether if Hades forced Persephone to eat the pomegranates or she willingly ate them. To be honest, we don't know what the accurate depiction would be when it comes to the pomegranate seeds, whether if Persephone ate willingly or Hades forced her. There are many different sources from Greek myths, they're not just very one-sided with their story. In my point of view, if I was doing the modern retelling story, or if there's going to be a full-length film or adaptation of Hades and Persephone in the future, should that excuse the abduction? No. Should it take away the trauma Persephone went through? No. Should it go into this extreme level of romanticizing Hades and villainizing Demeter? No. At the same time, I don't think it's a problem for dark romance storytellers to make the relationship between Persephone and Hades romantic. We can acknowledge that Hades' actions were wrong, while at the same time we can build a character development between the relationship of two peoples. Because, let's be honest, Hades and Persephone are the least problematic couples in Greek myths. Not to mention, Hades is an isolated figure who sometimes struggles to socialize with women from a modern lens perspective. There could be a scene of Hades trying to tell Persephone that he wasn't trying to hurt her, but he consented Zeus for her to live with him in the underworld. Since Zeus is a corrupted leader, maybe that could be the start of Hades building relations with Persephone. And slowly we start to see Hades and Persephone sharing things in common, sometimes having conflicts with each other as couples in the underworld, and seeing some bits of intimacy between these two characters, which could involve erotic themes maybe. And there should be a scene where Demeter is portrayed as a loving mother who isn't controlling but concerned over her daughter, and maybe there is a scene of Hades admitting his mistake to Demeter in the end of the story, which I think could make Hades a redeemable character. I also think that Hades should not be portrayed as this soft or sweet boy, since in the original material he is ruthless and cold, and I think Hades should be portrayed as this gray, complex character, which is more accurate to the ancient Greek myths. That's not to say he can't express his vulnerability when it comes to his relationship with Persephone. And in my version, Persephone willingly ate the pomegranates, since in the ancient Greek myths, Hades was one of the very few gods to treat his female partner as his equal. Minthi, I would obviously make her an antagonist since she represents jealousy, although I would portray her a sad villain since Hades lost interest in her despite the fact that she was never really the wife of Hades, and Hades never got into this affairs like Zeus, Poseidon, and other gods. That's what I would have done when it comes to these modern retellings, since it would be more accurate to ancient Greek myths. From what I'm aware of, the only modern media that doesn't erase the abduction trauma Persephone went through is God's School, where you can see how Persephone is terrified and Hades is being aggressive. This episode is again not entirely accurate because Hades tries to abduct her, but he fails since Hecate shows up in defense of Persephone. Again, the animator is still in process making more episodes, so maybe in the future we might see Hades abducting Persephone, maybe in the future, I don't know. Despite the fact this show is PG, the episode doesn't glorify Hades even though he is given this emo soft boy archetype. Either way, when I first heard about how Hades was misunderstood by early Western media and started learning about his history in Greek myth, I was actually drawn to the romantic relationship between Persephone and Hades since their story tends to be very poetic and represents a certain symbolism. For me, I have interest in dark romance where relationship is complicated, that has enemies to lovers, forbidden love, or conventional marriage trope, as long if it's executed well, which in many modern media it unfortunately isn't. Some are, in a way, are executed well. It's interesting how the evolution of Hades changed in pop culture despite extreme level of inaccuracies most medias have done to his character. But Hades and Persephone are both interesting, complex characters that showed a poetic representation of life when it comes to Persephone's character changing through seasons, while Hades is this authoritarian, ruthless, and cold ruler of the dead, despite the fact he is not a villain in Greek mythology, while expressing his vulnerability to his love interest, at least in modern sense of storytelling. And I also hope that there is probably more Greek representation when it comes to these adaptation of Greek god characters, because I don't think that a lot of these modern adaptation tend to represent like authentic Greek culture, which I hope in the future we get to see that. And you know, there obviously has been this discourse about the lack of representation of Greeks, including Egyptians and other groups who have been completely excluded by American media, but I don't think the Greeks really have like a film industry that made a cultural impact worldwide. But I don't know, when it comes to American media, I just hope that there's probably like authentic Greek representation when it comes to, you know, the Greek mythology and the gods and all of that, and demigods and mortals and all of that. And I hope you guys like my video, and I hope you guys subscribe and let me know what you guys think about, you know, the pop culture shift of, you know, the portrayal of Hades and the relationship of Hades and Persephone. And you guys can let me know in the comments if the criticisms towards their relationship is valid, or if you think that, you know, in modern media it's okay for their relationship to be in some ways romanticized. I mean, I don't know. I think the pop culture portrayal of Hades and Persephone is very interesting. Also, I hope you guys can go to my Instagram account and, you know, scroll down and you guys can give a like and appreciate the AI image I have made of Hades and Persephone. I worked really hard on this and I did not get enough appreciation for the post I made, so I tried to make it like very aesthetically pleasing. But yeah, please check out my Instagram account and like the post I made if you like it, and you guys can follow me on my Instagram and other accounts. But yeah.